The year is 2007. Amidst a new wave of console generations, many still refer to this as one of the best times in all of gaming history. Seriously, just listen to this ludicrous lineup of releases: BioShock, Halo 3, God of War 2, the Orange Box, which included all of Half-Life 2, Portal, and Team Fortress 2, and Super Mario Galaxy, just to name a few. This was the year that landmark franchises like Mass Effect, The Witcher, Assassin's Creed, and Uncharted all got their start. Modern Warfare showed Call of Duty fans that their military shooter could be more than a World War II simulator, and Crysis redefined what we thought was possible in terms of graphical fidelity. It was a mesmerizing era, but as you can see, most of these titles fell into the trend of where it seemed like games were headed: an endless sea of first-person shooters and more realistic visuals. Little did we know that over the next couple years, a whole new market would emerge for games that looked wildly different than the biggest hits. And it's all thanks to a few special titles that changed everything. So today, let's pay tribute to some of those classic indie games that turned an entire industry on its head. Back when gaming was still in its infancy, it was nearly impossible to make a game and release it to the masses by yourself and have it be a hit. Sure, there were smaller teams out there, but you needed a publisher, or at least a company that could produce thousands of carts or discs of your game. But by the late 2000s, digital distribution opened a new pathway for up-and-coming developers to release their games on their own. But Steam was much more picky back then about what they would allow on their platform. So the perfect place to be for these new indie teams was the Xbox Live Arcade. I remember getting all kinds of silly little games on here, like Splosion Man, where there's only one action button, explode, or Shadow Complex, which had the feel of a big budget game, but a more condensed experience overall. It felt like a whole new world had been discovered, and a big draw was that you could get them for super cheap as well. Full games weren't just $60 anymore. One of the first titles that put indie games on the map was Cave Story, a charming platforming adventure developed by one person, Daisuke Amaya, aka Pixel. This one didn't start on XBLA, but rather was released for free on PC, which quickly helped it gain steam. People were drawn in by its retro art style. It didn't look like anything else you could play at the time. But once you got further in, you realized it had a unique story and deep gameplay elements that far surpassed anything else that was free online at the time. Most others were simple flash games or idle time wasters. Cave Story was different. It wore its influences of Contra, Metroid, and Zelda on its sleeve, but it also had legs to stand on its own. My personal favorite aspect was how you leveled up your equipment. You gain experience by killing enemies, which can power your guns up to 3 levels. But if you get hurt, that power decreases. So you have extra reason to not get hit besides dying. Not only do you do more damage at max level, but some weapons give extra benefits, like the machine gun, allowing you to boost yourself up to higher ledges. It makes for a creative balance of using particular weapons for damage, but switching to others when gathering experience, to make sure you have an arsenal that's ready for anything. The main narrative had some really cool moments, but Cave Story also included a bonus ending that you trigger by completing certain objectives throughout the adventure. By making sure to save Curly and waiting to collect the booster pack until later in the game, you can unlock the Sacred Grounds and a secret final boss fight against Balos, which is extremely punishing since you can't save or heal before the battle. Was it perfect? Certainly not. It had its fair share of drawn-out fetch quests, and the lack of any auto-saving meant you had to redo a lot of progress if you weren't careful. But you see, Cave Story wasn't a gritty, linear shooter where you simply go from mission to mission. It was bright and colorful, open-ended, and held way more than meets the eye despite its simplistic appearance. In fact, its ability to offer a bevy of secret content helped directly influence our next game, Braid, designed by Jonathan Blow in 2008. Yet again, we have a side-scroller that pays homage to games of old, sometimes in blatant ways, but what makes Tim completely different from our favorite Goomba Stomper is his ability to rewind time at will. Now, of course, this isn't the first game to manipulate the progression of time, but because it only has 2 dimensions to worry about, it can really polish up what it sets out to do. And boy howdy does it take this concept to crazy limits. Some things aren't affected by the time reversal, others only move when you move. Or you can even do something, then rewind, and your shadow will do the action for you. It's a phenomenal puzzle game that really shows how this type of gameplay can tell a gripping story, while also being super fragmented at the same time. Chasing after the princess, Tim's only motivation, being revealed as a switcheroo and she's actually trying to get away from him the whole time, is incredible. But wait, there's so much more. Remember how I was talking about bonus content? Not only are the puzzle pieces really hard to collect, but they also included crazy challenging star pieces that you may not even know exist at first. Like, there's this cloud that looks like it's not even moving, but it is. It just takes about 2 hours to reach the other side, revealing a hidden star. Or here, you have to move some puzzle pieces around to make the shape of a star with the background and then it appears. Like, man, you can really see the budding of the witness in a game like this. It makes my head hurt. And if you collect them all, it turns out Tim was actually trying to create an atom bomb with the Manhattan Project, and the princess represented him finally succeeding. Seriously, what the heck? I love how Braid can use our preconceived notions of how games are supposed to be played, like moving to the right, jumping on enemies, keys and doors, to truly defy expectations, and elevate all games, AAA or otherwise, to new heights. Finally, the last game we're going to look at came out the same month as Braid, but couldn't be farther apart in tone and gameplay. Castle Crashers. In fact, the first time I heard about either of these games was in a Hey Ash What You Playin' episode, where Anthony is explaining why Braid is one of the most important games of the year, and then this happens.
It's meaningful in ways that I can't imagine that someone as stupid as you would actually understand the metaphors at work here, but
yeah, I was sold too. If it looks like Castle Crashers belongs on Newgrounds.com or something, that's because it's literally made by its creator, Tom Fulp, along with art by Dan Paladin. The behemoth's first hit, Alien Hominid, started as a flash game on the website as well. Castle Crashers takes the over-the-topness of classic arcade beat-em-ups and adds in wacky humor, a cartoony art style, and full 4-player action. The result is one of the most replayable games I've ever seen. I must have beaten it upwards of 20 times now. All the little details still put a huge smile on my face. Like how this henchman is just reading a newspaper when you bust into the castle. How the fish people turn into a tasty dinner upon death. Or how the Cyclops boss gives a sweet Terminator reference when it falls into the lava. There's a massive selection of weapons and animal companions with special abilities. And even lots of customization in how you level up or use each character's magical powers. And I think that's a huge reason it's so replayable. Every location is varied, the boss fights are basically insane, and it always keeps things interesting. From volleyball matches, to alien abductions, to this spot in the ice caverns, where you have to listen to the sound effects to know whether to jump or block the incoming arrows. Super clever. With an insane mode after beating the main story, battle arenas to test your skill, and tons of mini-games to round out the fun, this game will always have a special place in my heart. And I get really giddy when I find a friend who's never played it before, because I get to witness their reaction of seeing it for the first time. And it looks like I'm not alone. It went on to become the best-selling game on Xbox Live Arcade that year. The thing is, these are far from the only games to help blaze a trail for future indies. Supergiant's first foray, Bastion, built its environments all around you, as the narrator's sultry voice reacted to your every move, making it seem like you were the one creating the story as you went.
And then, he falls to his death. I'm just fooling.
Super Meat Boy showed us how far people will push their limits as long as you have extremely tight controls. It had tons of old school game references as well as nods to other indies, not to mention a seemingly endless amount of content. This was the first indie game I remember being mentioned during Game Trailer's Game of the Year awards. Speaking of references, I Wanna Be the Guy found that trolling the player can be a deliberate design choice, and some people will still have an enjoyable time, as long as all that evil is disguised as visiting classic video game worlds. Its creator, Kayan, helped jumpstart an entire subgenre, where now literally thousands of creators are making fan games just like he did. The list goes on and on. It's hard to say exactly why indie games took off. Maybe it was just at the right point where nostalgia for older games was taking root. Perhaps it was technology making it easier than ever to share your creations with one another. One thing is for certain, Without a few select developers deciding to break the mold and make titles in stark contrast to the majority of other games, indies wouldn't be a household name, and we wouldn't have the avenues in place for some of the biggest games of all time to take shape. I mean, look at Minecraft for Pete's sake. Talk about a game no one knew they wanted until they saw it in action. Nowadays, they're a thriving part of our industry, and we can always count on indie developers to try something new. While it does seem like the line of indie or AAA is blurred more than ever, I don't think that's a bad thing. Instead of being treated as a lower tier of an art form, games are seen as just games, and their merits tend to speak for themselves. It's a triumph for a character like Shovel Knight to be in the same game as countless other icons in Super Smash Bros. And I'm sure we'll see even more crossovers in the years to come. And we owe it all to the few titles that led the way. If you're a fan of indie games, what was the earliest one you remember playing? And what was it about these games that led you to love them today? Tell me about it in the comments below, and let's talk about it. The older I get, it becomes more and more apparent that indies are the lifeblood of gaming. They're guaranteed to pioneer, not just in gameplay, but also in industry standards. In a world that feels saturated with microtransactions and unhealthy practices, it seems like indie devs are the most generous when it comes to expansions or DLC. They just want to make great content from a place of passion. So to all indie games out there, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for creating magical memories, reminding me why I love games in the first place, and most of all, thank you for being you. Today's Patreon shoutout goes to Chris Davis, because he's just so courageous that I thought he should be famous. You can help support the channel as well at patreon.com/snowmangaming. I'll see you guys next time. Stay frosty, my friends.